Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a beer that is a three-way collaboration. It's 2/3 Swedish and 1/3 Canadian, and all three of these breweries I've had some very positive experiences with in the past. And this is yet another beer that was released on the 2nd of August 2019 through the Små Partiers in Systembolaget here in Sweden. So for this review, for the Swedish side of things, we're going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish. As I've told you, the kind of craft beer capital of Sweden, and this is another beer from Beerbliotek, and it's a collaboration with All In Brewing, who are one of the gypsy breweries around the Gothenburg area. And for the Canadian side of things, we're bringing in Collective Arts, who are from Hamilton in Ontario over in Canada. This particular beer is called the Gentle Giant. It's an IPA coming in at 8% ABV. I'm not sure exactly what type of IPA it is. I'm guessing with the way that things are going it will likely be a New England, but we'll see how it turns out. But this is number 256 according to the Beerbliotek numbering system. But Beerbliotek, one of my favourite Swedish craft breweries. For a brewery that tend to only brew their beers once, their beers are ridiculously good quality. All In Brewing I've had some very positive experiences with, both from the light end of the spectrum and from the dark end of the spectrum. I don't get to review all that many of their beers, and the same with Beerbliotek. For a long time it was quite frustrating with them because they were producing a lot of different beers, but because of the Systembolaget system it was quite difficult to get a hold of the various different things that they were doing. You could only get them in bars and stuff like that. And All In Brewing, of course, you know, I've had some really good IPAs and a couple of sour beers involving them as well, and the quality stuff is very good. Canadian beer was very difficult to get here in Europe for a long time too, so it's cool to see a Canadian brewery really starting to make its name established here in Europe. But I do want to try something from the darker end of the spectrum from them at some point too. But three very, very good breweries involved here. I've had positive experiences with all of them, and hopefully this beer kind of the quality of this beer matches the quality of the three breweries involved here, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on this one. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Beerbliotek, All In and Collective Arts. No doubt I will add more to all three in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you, and another one for all the Canadian beers. Those are being added to whenever I get the opportunity. The Swedish one more regular than the Canadian, obviously. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then. First off, we'll go to Beerbliotek, since these guys are the home brewery. So this brewery, as I've mentioned to you before, are based in Gothenburg, and it was founded back in 2013 by a multinational group of friends. This is Adam Norman, who's Australian, Richard Bull, who's a Kiwi from New Zealand, Anders Hedlund, who's a Swede, and Daryl Denecker, who comes from South Africa. So Adam and Richard ran Bar Doppio in Gothenburg, and Daryl and Anders were regular customers at the bar, and they often just used to sit and talk about beer. So one day they decided to buy a brew kit and start brewing their own stuff, and this was the birth of Beerbliotek Brewery. So the original brewery is in the old Klippan Sugar building, which is a really nice old building very close to the old Carnegie Brewery in Gothenburg, which is quite a famous beer brand. I really need to review that beer for you on the channel. It's just something I've never got around to doing, but a very famous Swedish beer brand. The brew kit that they had in there is from Brewfab in Scotland, who also equipped Brewdog, if memory serves me correctly, but in the first year they apparently brewed 38 different varieties of beer. All of their beers are brewed in very small batches, so they stick to their home brewing roots, and very rarely brew the same beer more than once. So initially they started out with having no fixed range, and they're always brewing new beers. But what I would say is that there are a number of beers that seem to appear very regularly. There was one, I forget what the exact name of it was, but it was a beer that had a little bit of ginger in it, which was really nice. That beer's appeared a few times. The Better Late Than Never New England IPA that they did with 6 Degrees North, that's appeared a few times as well. So the beers that they do that tend to be quite popular, there's a passion for gingers. The beers that they do quite regularly do seem to appear fairly often actually. So yeah, they brew a hell of a lot of different beers, but the ones that are popular will kind of come around again. So if you try a beer that you really like, don't be too worried if about not seeing that beer again. There is a good chance it will come back. But in 2015, these guys opened a second brewery in Kungston, which is where they now have their tap room and run their main brewing operations. I do want to get up there and check that out actually. But the old brewery is now used just for producing sour beers, and they're also working on a barrel aging project in the new brewery as well. And you did see me review, I think it was called the Would I Lie to You, which was really, really good. That was one of the first beers, I think, from their barrel aging project. But the idea behind the name Beerbliotek is that they wanted to create a wide variety of beers, basically, so that the customer is always learning something new. So basically the name is essentially the beer library. They wanted their customers to learn about a new hop variety or a new malt or a new yeast strain every time they're trying a different beer. So it's a really quite cool and quite novel idea actually. So, you know, as I say, Beerbliotek, one of the really kind of pioneering Swedish breweries in my opinion, and one of the real kind of staples, I guess you could say, of the Gothenburg beer scene. So one of the breweries that in my mind you really have to check out if you're interested in Swedish craft beer. My only frustration with these guys is that it is quite difficult to get a hold of certain beers that they do, but definitely worth checking out in my opinion. So yeah, that's all you need to know about Beerbliotek. Let's go on to the other side of the Swedish side of this beer, if you like. So All In Brewing then. So apparently there's 8 people running this brewery, including 3 brewers. They started up in 2012 under Pelle Frost, and they plan to have their own brewery in the future, but right now they're brewing at a variety of other breweries. So in the early years they travelled around Europe making collaborations with other breweries, but recently they've been brewing most of their beers inside Sweden. They started brewing with Brewski down in Helsingborg, and one of their brewers, Lucas, worked full time at Brewski, brewing both the All In beers and the Brewski beers, and later they brewed for a while at the West Coast Brewery as well. The 3 brewers originally were Lucas, Victor and Andreas. Lucas, from what I understand, is now at Stigbjerg's Brewery, but they've always been into the big kind of fruity American style IPAs, but they also like their Imperial stouts as well. But Victor and Andreas are the original guys, but Lucas was headhunted from another brewery, and as I said, he's now moved on to Stigbjerg's, and he was the head brewer for a period of time as well. But they work as a team to create the beers largely, and in 2015 they were voted as one of the top 100 brewers by Rate Beer. Every year they have their own beer festival in Gothenburg, which is called the All In Beer Fest, and some of the All In guys also have a bar in Gothenburg together with some of the guys from Dugas Brewery. This is called the Brewers Beer Bar, and there are 2 locations for this now, from what I understand. I do need to get up to Gothenburg and actually have a look at those as well. For some reason I've just never really explored Gothenburg that much in the 4 years that I've been in Sweden, and considering it's the craft beer capital of the country, it's somewhere that I really do need to get to go. But in my experience I've had some really good IPAs from All In Brewing. I've had a very good Imperial stout from them as well, so it's one of the Swedish breweries that you really do need to check out. You do get their beers fairly regularly through the monthly releases in Systembolaget, and I need to try and order another couple of those in for you and review those for you on the channel over the next little while. But a brewery that you really do need to check out in my opinion. But that's the Swedish side of the brewery. Let's get on to the Canadian side then. So Collective Arts, as I mentioned to you before, are based in Hamilton in Ontario, and they were founded back in 2013 by Matt Johnson and Bob Russell. So Matt comes from a background in marketing, and he worked in the beer industry for a number of years, working for Moosehead actually, who are one of the big Canadian macro producers, while Bob on the other hand came from a branding background and ran his own businesses for a good number of years too. But the brewery are based in the former brewery of Lakeport Brewing Company, which is leased from the Hamilton Port Authority. They share this facility with Nickelbrook Brewing, and it's known as the Arts and Science Brewery. The current brewmaster is Ryan Morrow, and he's also the brewmaster for Nickelbrook Brewing, for whom he's worked since 2006. And the whole idea behind this brewery was apparently to bring together local artists, musicians, filmmakers and photographers and stuff like this through the sociability of craft beer, hence the name Collective Arts Beer. And over the last year or two, I want to say, this brewery really has made their name over here in Europe. Like, if anyone thinks of Canadian craft beer, quite a lot of people will tell you about Collective Arts. I mean, there are a few other breweries that have made it over here, but quite a few of them Quebecois breweries actually, but there's not too much in the way of Canadian beer over here in Europe. It is mainly American things that we get over here. But in my mind, it's really cool to see a Canadian brewery coming over here. Calling the Mothership, if I'm remembering the name correctly, their double IPA is a regular here in the Systembolaget range in Sweden, and that's one that you definitely need to check out. It's a very good it's a very good value bang for your buck craft beer, that in my mind. 30 crowns for a double IPA pretty much, so it's a very, very good value double IPA, and it's very nice actually. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about Collective Arts Brewing for the moment. A very good Canadian brewery in my mind, and as I said, all three of the breweries involved with this beer are pretty damn solid. So it'll be interesting to open this one up and see exactly what they've produced here. So let's get rid of the brewery notes and get on to the actual beer tasting itself. If you want to learn a little bit more about the breweries, of course, you can check out their Facebook and Instagrams and stuff like that. That'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on there. And you know, the brewery websites are in the description below as well. So there you can see, there is the Gentle Giant in the artwork there. I do always like the artwork that you get on these Beerbliotek beers. I'm guessing the artwork on this one might have come from someone involved with Collective Arts, because it's a little bit different from the ones that I've normally had from Beerbliotek. But it says on the side here, the double IPA, this beer is a collaboration with the giants of the Canadian brewing scene. Is a double IPA that quickly walks over, it sits down and gently smashes you in the face. Can art is a thing, beerbliotek.com and Collective Arts Brewing. So yeah, cool. I thought that was, didn't think that was the end of the sentence there, but I do always like this. One of the things I always like to point out with this beer, with the Beerbliotek beers, I love it how they put the Swedish craft beer thing on the back of that. I wish more Swedish breweries would do that, in fact, but unfortunately in Sweden it seems to be a little bit, you know, there seems to be a little bit of negative connotations to putting Swedish flags on things and stuff like that, which is quite sad, I think. But yeah, something I've noticed since I've been here the last couple of years. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Like I said, this is the Gentle Giant, and it's an IPA coming in at 8% ABV. On the pour, this one's actually looking a little bit like a more West Coasty IPA. Not quite as hazy as you'll find from some of them, but yeah, it looks pretty cool, I have to say. So yeah, if I hold this one up to the light, I'm not sure, going by the appearance, it's got a little bit of the New England haze, but it's not quite as hazy as some of them, so it could well be a West Coast IPA. I'm guessing that it probably will be a New England one, just with the way things are in the beer scene at the moment. But as you can see, this one is a half finger, frothy, I would say cream coloured head. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall, it does look pretty nice, and I got a nice waft of orange from this beer as I opened it up, so I've got a feeling there might be a little bit of mosaic in this one. But yeah, there's a good, I think, there's something in my head that's just saying maybe Mosaic Galaxy, and could there be a bit of Equinaut in there? The other one it could be, of course, is Eldorado. As I always say, I like playing Guess the Hops with these beers, but in terms of appearance, there's nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider it as an IPA. It looks a little bit more like a New England IPA, but it's not as hazy as some of the ones that you're going to come across. But let's have a proper look at the aroma and just see how you go on. As I said, I suspect perhaps Mosaic, Galaxy or Eldorado, and there could be a little bit of Equinaut in here. So for me, straight away, there's a good bit of a limey quality to this one. Yeah, there is a good bit of limey quality to this beer. On top of that, there's quite a strong passion fruity note as well, in my mind. I mean, the other one that I'm thinking of that it could be, that seems to be getting more and more popular, it could be like Idaho 7, which is an interesting one. It's got those kind of passion-y, tropical fruity notes as well. So yeah, in my mind, good bit of passion fruit. There is a bit of mangoes, papaya type thing in this one as well. Apricots maybe too. For me, a little touch of a, well, not a little touch, a good bit of a tangerine orange. Nice big juicy tangerine orange. And there's a little bit of a limey quality at the front end of this one too. So the fruity side of this beer is actually quite pungent. It is a little bit punchy, to be honest with you. Yeah, I really like how this one is going together. Yeah, this is a nice big, it's got a nice big oily, quite sharp, punchy, juicy, fruity thing to it, and you know, definitely in my mind, in terms of the IPA spectrum, this one's really leaning towards that punchy, juicy, fruity side of things, and I like that about this beer. On the green side of the hops, for me, this is definitely a more floral one. I don't find this one too resinous. It's definitely quite a slightly spicy, floral aromatic note coming out of the beer, and I think that would be the Galaxy. If there is Galaxy in this, that I think is the one that's giving you the most floral quality, but the Equinox can do that as well, if it is Equinox in here indeed. But yeah, that's a really nice aroma to this beer. It's got a punchiness from the fruit, and it's also got a bit of a punchiness from the grassy floral character as well. But yeah, on the malty side of things, there's a nice little bit of it's not really too wheaty, this one. I'm finding this one to be more oaty. There is a little touch of the wheaty note in there, the white bready quality, and you get some of the oaty creaminess on top of that. Maybe a slight little bit of biscuit as well, which is interesting. But it's kind of it is just kind of interesting how that whole thing sort of goes together. I really like how the aroma of this beer goes together. It is quite punchy. This one definitely leans towards the sharper end of the spectrum, but it does have a nice little bit of smoothness and sweetness underneath just to balance it out. But as I always say, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma, but we're going to get stuck into this one now and just see how we go on. This one is the Gentle Giant, an IPA coming in at 8% ABV. Quite sure it's a New England one, from Beerbliotek, and All In from Gothenburg, and Collective Arts from Hamilton in Ontario over in Canada. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål. Yeah, that's pretty solid actually. I don't think this one is fully quite as fresh as it would have been at some point. I think this one might have been sitting in the warehouse a little bit, to be honest with you, but I'll bear that in mind. It's still pretty solid, don't get me wrong on that, but I don't think this beer is at its freshest, I'll say that. And this is one of the things that you sometimes find with Systembolaget that can be a little bit frustrating, to be honest, is they don't seem to know how to store beer properly. So yeah, with this beer then, in the middle of your palate you're going to feel that nice smooth white bready quality. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. You can definitely feel in the centre of your palate more of the oaty kind of creaminess coming out of this beer, and in the very centre of your tongue there is a teeny little bit of a caramel note in there, but it's more leaning towards a sort of biscuity McVitie's digestive sort of sweetness actually. So I mean, the malt base in this beer isn't that surprising. If you were to blind taste this one, you are going to be able to tell that it's a little bit more kind of boozy, if you like. You will be able to tell that this one is a double IPA, and that's something I've always said about these beers. I think when you go above 8% with a New England IPA, unless you add a little bit of caramel or something like that to it, you are going to struggle to cover up the booziness, and you can feel with this one is just kind of on the edge of where you would need to add some extra kind of sweetness to the malt base. But the malt base in this one is pretty good. It's nothing surprising, but it's pretty solid. And I do remember instantly that from both Collective Arts and from Beerbliotek, they do tend to favour a very smooth malt base like that has an element of creaminess to it. So for me, the malt base in this one is quite typical of what you would normally get from either of those breweries. All In Brewing, I don't think I've had a New England IPA from them yet, if memory serves me correctly, so I can't really speak for them. But the malt base, you can feel it drying out a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste, but when it dries out, it really does smoothen out at the same time as well, which is really interesting. Hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness in there, which again makes me suspect there's a bit of mosaic in here. As you come further forward along the sides of the tongue, the earthiness smooths out a little bit. You start to get a nice little bit of a floral aromaticity to the beer, which is kind of cool. Then round the very front curve of the palate, you get that lighter sort of grassiness there, and of course behind the front curve of the tongue, that's where you get that little oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to come out of the beer. And to be honest, this one is actually quite similar to the Aroma in my mind. So if you go towards the back of that oily part of the beer, yeah, I would say there's a little bit of a kind of passion fruity note to this one. Having tasted this beer, I'm not so sure if there's Galaxy in this. There is a little bit of that darker passion fruity type note to this one, but it's not quite as strong and pungent as I remember Galaxy being. So there is a little bit of that darker passion fruity, grapefruity note at the back of the palate there. As you come further forward, it starts to lean a little bit more towards a sort of papaya, mango-y type quality. I don't think it's Citra that's in here either. Pretty sure it's not Citra, but I'm doubting myself as to whether it was Galaxy. Like I say, I just like this Guess the Hop game. As you come further forward from that though, you start to get a little touch of, I think there's a bit of an orangey quality to this one, but this beer definitely leans more towards the lighter, smoother, tropical fruit baskety type things. It does lean a little bit more towards that sort of stone fruity side of things, this beer. For me though, when you come forward just to in front of the tip of the tongue, there is a little bit of a limey quality to this one, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of mosaic in here. There is just a limey quality around the front kind of edge of the palate there. I mean, it is almost lemon limey, so could be a bit of Centennial, but I would be more inclined to say that it's Equinaut in this one. It's an interesting beer, this one. For me, this definitely leans towards that juicy, fruit baskety, tropical side of things, but it's got a little bit of that limey sharpness, dryness, if you like, to in the aftertaste too. In the aftertaste, it's definitely some of the floral quality, the smoothness of the malt base, and that limey note that's just lingering there too. There is a bit of an almost tangerine-y, orangey flavour to this one. So I really would be interested to know what hops it is that's in this beer, because it's a very interesting combination. The ones that spring to mind, as I said, I thought Galaxy initially, but I'm not so sure about that now. It could be, you know, El Dorado might be the other one, or Idaho 7. Could be the other one that's in there. I think there might be a bit of mosaic in this because of the earthiness that the beer has, and I think there might be Equinaut in there as well, just because of the limey presence the beer has. As I say, could be completely wrong, but I think I've picked out the right flavours, but maybe not necessarily the right hops with this beer. But it's a really solid double IPA, this one. If you know how Beerbliotek and All In, and Beerbliotek and Collective Arts like their New England IPAs, this one isn't too much of a surprise. It's quite similar to what they've kind of done before. It's, in terms of the New England IPAs overall, it is one of the smoother kind of creamy type things, but it does have a little bit more pungency to its fruit in my mind, especially with that sort of limey flavour that the beer has. But it's really quite nice. It's very solid. I don't think it's quite at its freshest, if that makes sense. I think that I've got a feeling that Systembolaget haven't stored it properly, but that said, it's a really solid double New England IPA, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. I'd love to try it on tap actually at their bar in Gothenburg and see how it turns out, but as it stands, it really is pretty solid. In terms of the mouthfeel then, I think I would describe this beer as being fairly mid-bodied. Yeah, fairly mid-bodied beer, this one. Carbonation is very smooth on this. To me, this beer, it has an element of creaminess to it, but this is one of the more oily New England IPAs. It's almost like 50% creamy, 50% oily, so it's an interesting mouthfeel. And I think the oiliness helps to bring out rather some of the kind of limey aspects and some of the stronger tropical fruits. And I think the more that you drink of this beer, the stronger those fruity flavours that I was talking about start to become. So the malt base in this one, I think, it is very smooth and creamy, but at the same time it's got a little touch of sweetness to it. A little bit of hoppy bitterness in here. I think you're talking around 30-35 IBUs with this beer, and you've got a nice strong fruitiness to this beer that works very, very well for it. So yeah, you know, if you like your New England IPAs to be a little bit more pungent with the fruity side of things but smooth in the malt base, this is one I think that you will quite enjoy, and for me it's pretty solid, and it's cool to see these three breweries collaborating. So let's leave it at that for this one. This is the Gentle Giant, a New England double IPA coming in at 8% ABV from Beerbliotek, All In Brewing, both from Gothenburg, and Collective Arts from Hamilton in Ontario in Canada. I think the name suits it quite well because it is a bit of a boozy beast, but it is quite smooth and easy drinking at the same time. So I can see why they went with that name for it. So thumbs up to all of the breweries involved here. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from all three of these breweries, and I'm sure I'll be returning to them at some point very, very soon. The Gentle Giant from All In and Beerbliotek in Gothenburg, and Collective Arts in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Slàinte, Scoil, Campai.